Severe ice storm cuts power to over 1 million people. Well over 1 million people were shivered in icebound homes across the country this week, waiting for warmer weather and for utility crews to restring power lines brought down by a storm that took 23 lives as it took a snowy, icy journey from the southern plains to the east coast. But with temperatures plunging, utility officials warned that it could be mid-February, could be weeks, before electricity is restored to some of the hardest hit places. The worst of the power failures were in Kentucky, Arkansas, and Ohio. Just getting to their source was difficult for utility crews. Ice-encrusted tree limbs and power lines blocked glazed roads, and cracking tree limbs pierced the air like firecrackers as they snapped. In Kentucky, National Guard soldiers were dispatched to remove the debris. Oklahoma, already struggling to restore power there, planned to send some crews to help in Arkansas later in the week. It looked like a tornado came through, but there wasn't a path. It was everywhere, said the chief executive officer of the North Arkansas Electric Cooperative in Salem. And the power is out of his house too, and he spent Tuesday night in a chair at his office. He said the storm was worse than we ever imagined. Unimaginable. Many people huddled next to fireplaces. In Arkansas, where ice was 3 inches thick in some places, people huddled next to fireplaces, wood-burning stoves, and portable heaters powered by generators. And when it got too cold, they left for shelters, emergency shelters, or relatives' homes. The number of homes and businesses without power totaled approximately 1.4 million on Wednesday evening in a broad swath of states from Oklahoma to West Virginia. Arkansas had more than 350,000 customers in the dark. Kentucky had approximately 500,000, and the actual number of people affected by the power failures could be even much higher. In Kentucky, the power outages produced by the ice storm were outdone only by the remnants of Hurricane Ike, which lashed the state with fierce winds last year, leaving approximately 600,000 customers without power. The governor said he was seeking a federal emergency disaster declaration, a key step in securing federal assistance for storm victims. We've got lots of counties that do not have any communications, any heat, any power. It's real bad. Various charities opened shelters across the region, but with the power out nearly everywhere, including at some radio stations, it was difficult to spread the word. Some deputies went door to door and offered to drive the elderly people to safety. Meanwhile, some community leaders buckled down for a very long haul. Kentucky Public Protection Cabinet spokesman Dick Brown urged people to conserve water because power failures could limit supplies in some areas. Yes, this is a severe ice storm on top of many other ice storms that they've had this winter. And here's something that's connected. New study: expect 1,000-year climate impacts. Stopping emissions won't prevent decreased rainfall, higher sea levels, or extreme weather. Yes, this is also about extreme weather all around the world. It's becoming more extreme day by day. Even if the world can cap carbon dioxide emissions tied to global warming, expect to see more droughts and sea level rise that span centuries, not just decades according to a new study sponsored by the U.S. government. People have imagined that if we stopped emitting carbon dioxide, the climate would go back to normal in 100 years, 200 years. That's just not true. The team has concluded global warming tied to higher CO2 is largely irreversible for at least 1,000 years after emissions stop. Again, warming tied to higher CO2 is largely irreversible for at least 1,000 years even after the emissions stop. Climate change is real. The findings were announced as President Barack Obama ordered reviews that could lead to automobiles that emit less CO2 and get higher gas mileage. Climate change has been driven by gases in the atmosphere that trap heat from solar radiation and raise the plant's temperature. The greenhouse effect. Carbon dioxide has been the most important of those gases because it remains in the air for hundreds and hundreds of years. And while other gases are responsible for nearly half of the warming, they degrade more rapidly. Before the Industrial Revolution, the air in the atmosphere contained approximately 280 parts per million of carbon dioxide. Now, that has risen to at least 385 parts per million today, and it's rising rapidly. And politicians and scientists have debated at what level it could even be stabilized. The peer-reviewed study concludes that if CO2 is allowed to peak at 450 to 600 parts per million, the results would include persistent decreases in dry season rainfall that are comparable to the 1930s U.S. Dust Bowl in many zones, including the U.S. Southwest, Southern Europe, Africa, Eastern South America, and Western Australia. The new study, which relied on computer models and historical temperatures, was published in Tuesday's edition of Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Warmer climate also is causing expansion of the ocean. Additional contributions to sea level rise from the melting of glaciers and polar ice sheets are too uncertain to even quantify in the same way. They could be much larger. We just don't have the same level of knowledge about those terms. The minimum sea level rise that we can expect from well understood physics, and even with that, we were surprised that it was so large. Although global warming has been slowed by the oceans, which absorb carbon, that positive effect will wane or reduce over time, and eventually oceans will actually warm the planet by giving off their stored up heat to the air. It's not like air pollution, where if we turn off a smokestack in a few days, the air is clear. It means we have to try even harder to reduce emissions rapidly. While scientists have been aware of the long-term aspects of climate change, the new report highlights and provides more specifics on them, said the head of climate analysis at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. This aspect is one that is poorly appreciated by policymakers and the general public, and it is quite real. Again, and it is real. Yes, and these are, once again, more signs of the end times transition days. There is a huge transition going on around the world. And yes, change is coming. Change is happening rapidly. Yes, climate change is real. And it's speeding up. It's increasing. And all these things are connected to everything else that's going on all around the world. And again, Again, these are more signs.